Prime Minister Narendra Modi is all set to embark on a 6-day diplomatic tour covering Nigeria, Brazil and Guyana to strengthen bilateral ties and engage in strategic dialogues. In Nigeria, marking the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister in 17 years, Modi will discuss the expanding the 2007 strategic partnership with President Bola Tinubu and address the Indian diaspora. In Brazil, he will attend the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, hosted by President Lula da Silva. Concluding in Guyana, Modi will meet President Irfan Ali, address the Guyanese parliament and the Indian diaspora, and participate in the CARICOM India summit to advance Indo-Caribbean relations. Viewers, we'd like to bring in a special guest, former diplomat Deepak Vora. Good morning, sir, and welcome to Republic TV.
What a wonderful way to start the morning, being on your amazing channel and learning from you. Thank you.
All right, so just to start off this conversation, really, now that it's a milestone visit that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is embarking on, since it is after 17 long years that an Indian Prime Minister is going to be visiting an African nation. So how is that likely to sort of strengthen the bilateral trade relations also between India and the various countries in the African continent?
That's a wonderful question. Ma'am, you do realize that there's not one Africa, it's 54 countries. And Prime Minister is going to the largest country there in terms of population, 235 million, Nigeria. I've served there, ma'am. I've served in Guyana. I'm familiar with Brazil. Let me begin very quickly by saying something that I'll refrain from saying all the nice things that we normally do. What is Nigeria's issue today? Since independence, it has seen it all. Devastating civil war, the Biafra war in the late 60s, ethnic clashes, religious strife, Christian, Muslim, Boko Haram, IS, massive corruption, terrorism, poor-rich divide, huge inflation, etc., etc. It's seen it all. May I just simply say that Nigeria today is where we were perhaps 50 years ago. We have this strategic partnership, but more than that, Nigeria wants to learn from how we have managed our economy, how we manage food. We no longer have essential hunger in India. We have no hunger at all. Second largest producer in the world. And they also want to learn from our digital public infrastructure. I have many friends there. I keep in touch with them. Excuse me. On the other hand, we are very happy to share our defense strategy, our defense ideas. With Nigeria, we had built the Nigerian Defense Academy. So all in all, this is a visit, I believe, that will reinforce the bonds of friendship. 50,000 Indian diaspora, 50,000 Nigerians in India, 40,000 Nigerians have studied in India. They are our unofficial ambassadors. It will build new bridges and reinforce the existing ones. And Africa also gets the message that India, which pioneered Africa's entry into the G20 last year at the New Delhi summit, India looks to Africa with considerable affection and holds itself up as a reliable, trustworthy partner. I believe that is the biggest message that the Prime Minister, who's going there after so many years, would be giving to Africa.
Also coming to, as you mentioned, the G20 summit, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also expected to meet his counterparts from Australia and Italy on the sidelines of the event. Are there any expectations on that front?
As far as the bilateral meetings are concerned, this will be decided in due course. Yes, there would be. He'll talk to the... See, ma'am, what happens, and I've attended several of these, what happens is the leaders get together and they talk about this, that, and the other. And then when they move aside for the bilateral meeting, that's when they discuss issues and say, look, bilaterally, you have to do this, we'll do this. And together, as far as G20 or the world economic situation or the world political situation or conflicts are concerned, we can handle this. The biggest takeaway, I believe, that we will see from Brazil is this alliance against hunger and poverty, the two major causes of conflict, not just between states, but within states. I believe this is going to be phenomenal. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has always been talking about the energy crisis, the food crisis, the hunger crisis. As far as the Ukraine-Russia conflict is concerned, he's talked about the food crisis, the fuel crisis, the fertilizer crisis. Ma'am, not too long ago, I think in the early 80s, Nigeria and all of Africa, in fact, they used to be exporters of food. And then suddenly around 2010, they've become net importers. Nigeria is a large importer of food. So this is the issue that one has to look at. In Africa, it's always a conflict between potential, which induces hope, and performance, which generates despair. But I think India's presence in Africa is going to make a difference, and India's presence at G20 will be a continuation of what we did at the New Delhi summit. The G20 looks to India as a natural leader, as the voice of the global south. One final thing. You know, ma'am, we have the G77, the group of developing countries, and we have the G7, the so-called leaders of the world. And G20 is a kind of via media between the two. We have the management, which is G7, we have the workers' union, which is G77, and we are the link between the two. And I believe that is going to be very, very significant. So the fact that we are continuing with these annual these annual summits, that itself is very significant. The United Nations has faded into total irrelevance. G20 is probably the hope for developing countries, and now they have a voice. They have a voice not just through India, but also through membership of the African Union.
That's right, Mr. Vora. Thank you so much for those crucial inputs coming in as the G20 really looks to India as the voice of the global south, especially.